Hello, and welcome to our second episode of looking at the history of the New Testament. Today we want to look at Paul in Colossae. We're going to look at his letter to the Colossians, chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Now, the interesting thing about the Colossian church is that it wasn't actually planted by Paul. It was actually a friend of his, a student of his called Epaphras. It was mostly Gentiles, and when Paul was in Ephesus, he used it as a church planting hub. And what he did was he trained up people, and then he sent them out to the surrounding towns and villages and cities. We read in Acts 19, verses 9 and 10, "And he entered the synagogue and for 3 months spoke boldly, reasoning and persuading them about the kingdom of God. But when some became stubborn and continued in unbelief, speaking evil of the way before the congregation, he withdrew from them and took the disciples with him, reasoning daily in the hall of Tyrannus. This continued for 2 years, so that all the residents of Asia heard the word of the Lord, both Jews and Greeks." We also read in Colossians chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, "You heard the gospel which came to you from Epaphras, our beloved fellow servant. He is our faithful minister of Christ on your behalf, and has made known to us your love in the Spirit." Now, the city of Colossae was built on an ancient Roman trade route, and by Paul's day it had been eclipsed by another city close by, Laodicea. It was destroyed by earthquakes twice, AD 17 and AD 60, and they rebuilt it both times. Now, central to the theme of Colossians is another fact, and that is that a group of Stoics lived and taught in Colossae, and they had their teachings, the root of them was in Plato. Now, Jews had come into the Colossian church, and they were causing a few problems. They, like in Galatia and some other places that we read about Paul, they said Jesus was a Jew, and so if you wanted to be a good Christian, you should also become a Jew, and you needed to follow certain rules and laws, the food laws, the worship laws. And in so doing, you would become a good Christian like Jesus. Enter our passage where Paul says, "Let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of things to come, but their substance belongs to Christ." Now, Christian Settler from the University of Zurich says the reality, the body which casts the shadow, belongs to the Messiah Jesus. This corresponds to the use of shadow and body and similar expressions in Plato, and influenced by him in Philo and Josephus. And Ian Smith, the principal of Christ College in Sydney, says that Paul is using Hellenistic Platonic categories of shadow and reality. The Jewish laws were shadows of the greater reality of Jesus. What exactly do they mean that he was using Platonic categories of shadow and reality? Well, hold on to your seats, because we are going to go for a little ride in ancient philosophy. Plato was a student of Socrates, and he lived in Athens. He had this analogy, or this parable of the cave, which he taught. And in it he said, imagine that there's a cave of people locked up. Their hands, their feet, and their necks are tied so that they can only see straight ahead. Behind them is a fire, which casts shadows on the wall in front of them. Occasionally, people or animals pass in front of the fire, and their shadow is cast on the wall. These prisoners name the shadows cat, dog, man, and in their reality, the shadows are actually the objects. Now imagine that one of the prisoners is freed. He sees what is casting the shadows. He understands that the shadow only represents the dog, the cat, and the man. Then the freed prisoner is taken out of the cave and into the bright light. At first he is confused and disoriented by the sun, but gradually his eyes adjust, and he understands fully. He can even look into the sun and see it in its full wonder. This man returns to the cave. He tries to tell the other prisoners about what he saw. He struggles to even see the shadows cast on the cave wall, because his eyes have adjusted to the sunlight outside. The remaining prisoners gang up on him, beat him, and call him a liar. They cannot and will not listen because they cannot comprehend what he tries to tell them. Plato ends this analogy by saying, and if they were to lay hands on the one who was trying to release them and lead them upwards, wouldn't they kill him? Most violently. And so Paul uses this in our text. Listen to our passage again. Let no one pass judgment on you in question of food and drink, or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. You see, Paul says that these are shadows of Jesus. Jesus is the shadow caster, and everything in the Old Testament Torah is his shadow. Everything in the Hebrew Scriptures points to him, and Jesus is seen so clearly in that bright light. So, what I believe Paul is saying here is that he is living the reality of Plato's parable of the cave. If you think about it, where is Paul writing this from? He's writing it from prison, isn't he? And how did he get it in prison? Well, he tried to tell people that Jesus was the Messiah. He said, I have seen what the shadows were. I saw who was casting the shadows. I was released from the cave and I got to see God in all his glory in Jesus. And he went and tried to tell people about that, and that's what got him in trouble in Jerusalem. That's what got him arrested. That's why he went on trial. That's why he appealed to Caesar. And now he's sitting in a prison cell waiting his trial from Nero. And he says to these Colossians, what Plato meant as a parable, I am living as a reality. So don't worry about the shadows. Don't worry about the food laws. Don't worry about the festivals and the new moons. Don't worry about the Sabbaths. They all point to Jesus. Look at Jesus. In that bright light. So, was Paul a Platonist? No. He differs from Plato in many things, not least being his view of the end times and the resurrection. You see, Plato said that the body needs to be freed. The soul needs to be freed from the body. The soul needs to return to its eternal state unencumbered by the body. And Paul says God is going to reunite our soul and our body at the last time, in the end of the resurrection, where we will have actual literal bodies like Jesus did. But what we can understand is that Paul used his culture to illustrate the good news of Jesus. Paul wasn't afraid, like we saw last time when he went to Athens, to use things from his culture to help people understand who Jesus was. So it says in 1 Corinthians 9, for though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law, or to the Greeks, to the Gentiles, I became as one outside the law, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessing. So what does this mean for us? Well, I think it means at least one thing is that look at Jesus and see him in his wondrous glory. And then go out into your world around you and tell the people about Jesus by using references to the culture around you so that they can understand, so that they can see clearly Jesus. Understand that they might not understand who Jesus is right now, but you can help them. Well, next week we're also going to look at Colossians again, another part of Colossians, and I look forward to sharing again some of the history of the New Testament and the times of Paul. Till then, God bless and have a good week.